Hi everyone, welcome to this brand new episode of VFX Futures. I'm your host Ian Fales from beforesandafters.com. Today is a special sponsored ep from Cinesite, which is currently celebrating its 30th anniversary. And to help celebrate, I'm joined by three members of the technology team at the VFX studio from around the world. Firstly, CTO Michele Scaletti. Hi Michele, how are you?
Hello, I'm great, thank you.
Whereabouts are you at the moment?
I'm in London, so at the
Oh,
very end of my day.
oh great. And Group Head of CG, VFX, Holger Voss. Hi Holger.
Hello, nice to meet you, Ian.
You're in Germany right now, Holger, is that right?
I am, but I'm actually working for the Montreal office most of the time.
Also here is Group Head of CG Animation, Hank Driscoll. Hi Hank, how's things?
Hi, good. I'm actually in Montreal, so I appreciate that we're doing the podcast at a reasonable hour for me and an unreasonable hour for the rest of you.
That's right. What I wanted to talk to each of you about was the kinds of things in technology terms that visual effects studios talk about inside their walls. I feel like I've covered so many new technologies, virtual production, AI, machine learning, the distributed nature of VFX right now. But I thought this would be a great insider's view. And Cinesite, given its history, has really changed a lot and has always been at the forefront of technology. So maybe, Michele, starting with you, I wonder if you could give me a bit of insight into your role at Cinesite first and some of the overall technology things that you've been observing very lately.
Right. So, yeah, my role is I'm the group CTO, so I look after technology across all the studios in the group, which includes the Cinesite studios, as well as the other sister companies like Image Engine and Trickster. And funny enough, I'm celebrating this week my 20 years at Cinesite. So out of the 30
Wow.
years of Cinesite itself, so I've been here for the last 20. So I have a good perspective on how the studio has evolved over the last few years.
Fantastic. And Holger, what about you? What's your role at Cinesite at the moment, and what are some of your brief observations about what that role involves and the tech involved?
I'm currently in the role of the group head of CG. It's sort of the bridge between technology, production, finding the right balance, like assignment of artists to shows, and also like what key technologies might need an overhaul for a show. What's the right approach, guiding VFX supervisors on their decisions for technical choices. And I've been with Cinesite 18 years this month.
Brilliant. And Hank, what about you? You're relatively new to the team in some ways.
Quite a bit. No, I started 11 months ago, so I'm very much still new to the team. And other than annoying these two on a regular basis, my role is about figuring out workflows and processes and tools and how do we want to evolve our animation workflow, which is still newer compared to the visual effects process. Animation here has been going for 5-6 years now. There's a number of projects under our belt. Each project is a nice step forward. So with each film to film, you can see the evolution of both the tools and the crew using them. And the caliber of animation is improving with each project. The exciting thing for all of us is where we go with all of that. Cinesite not that long ago was a single location, and now it's 6 locations, 1,200 people, and continuing to grow. So that gives us plenty of challenges. As far as my role, the animation and visual effects have some things that are very much the same and some things that are distinctly different in terms of what their needs are and what their challenges are. So a lot of it's just making sure that we're understanding all of that. That's what I think all of us do together, is make sure we're making choices that benefit everyone.
Yeah. I just want to make sure people, when I say Hank is new to the team, he's not new to VFX and animation with many years at Blue Sky. I want to pick up something you said, Hank, about 6 locations and really that change in VFX. And maybe going to you, Michele, first, like What has been that big change you've noticed? I mean, clearly COVID has meant that people are working from home, but Cinesite in London, Montreal, Vancouver, and elsewhere means that you have to set up communication lines. I mean, what does that actually involve?
So it's a very good question, and without a doubt, the working in such a widely distributed group brings a lot of challenges, a lot of opportunities, without a doubt, but at the same time challenges. From a perspective of communication, without a doubt, making sure that all the teams are equally engaged, involved, and participating into the direction and the strategy that we're following is without a doubt a challenge. And that's actually something that Henk and Holger are really play a key part in that process, is making sure that we have some consensus, or at least a very clear direction that we want to follow in all the decision-making processes, so that all the studios are feeling that they are represented and contributing to the overall direction. We are trying to, in the last few years, we've seen some interesting challenges in consolidating our workflow and our pipeline. That is still something that is constantly evolving. As we all know, a visual effects or an animation pipeline is never finished. It's always a work in progress, and there's always, everywhere you look, there's always room for improvements and opportunities to make things easier, faster, producing better result. And in the last few years, particularly, we had a challenge of having multiple pipelines across the group, and which is something that clearly produces some inefficiencies, some duplication of effort, duplication of work. So we've been working hard to try and consolidate where it makes sense to consolidate the way we work, so that we can, again, not only avoid duplication of effort, but also make it easier for all of our artists in the multiple locations to collaborate. That has been a key effort for us following this significant growth and the expansion from a studio just, again, 7 or 8 years ago, 7 years ago, only doing visual effects in London, to now these multiple locations doing visual effects and feature animation under this incredible growth. The challenge is really managing that growth in a way that is efficient, in a way that is also, in some sense, efficient, without throwing resources where it's not needed. So that has been one of the key challenges for us in the last few years, and it's still an ongoing, ongoing process. We're still very much improving on that front on a regular basis, and getting ready for even more expansion.
And Holger, is there anything you can say in terms of technology, cloud technology, or security technology that you've sort of adopted quite recently, or been using for a while? I think people out there might be interested in what Cinesite is actually doing to connect each office.
Well, we have a good connectivity between the sites. We share same production databases across the site. We can work individual shots, multi-site. We can share sequences. We can split actually shots by tasks, so do lighting in one location, do the comp in another location. During the pandemic, also, we used a lot the luxury of having people remote just into another office. So you could just very ad hoc, without syncing the data, get a pair of helping hands if somebody's on downtime in another location. The other, I think, big improvement which we have now is we can render across all sites. So it's, we're not limited by our own hardware or the available cloud resources in a certain location, which is extensively used. As we all know, there's never enough rendering. No matter how big the farm is, somebody will fill it at any given point. So that's what we do.
Right. And Hank, is there a big difference between the pipeline requirements for animation and the pipeline requirements for VFX at Cinesite?
Yes and no. I mean, the pipeline as a whole, the way that an animation show works versus the way a visual effects show works, there's a lot in common. and we look for those areas of commonality wherever we can. As they've been touching on, one of the big pushes has been towards consolidating, and that's given us a lot of flexibility to pull in artists. On an animated project, the story evolves till really, really late. And so that often means that shot production ends up being compressed, and you get this big spike at the end, trying to scramble to get the work done and hit the release date. And we took great benefit from the Blazing Samurai team wrapping up earlier this year and then having a free moment before rolling on to the next film in Montreal. They were helping out with Addams Family 2 in Vancouver, things like that. We have a lot of workflow, personnel flexibility with the commonality we found in the pipe, and using visual effects artists in London who had a free moment to help out as well with aspects of getting Addams Family 2 across the finish line. That's been really strong. It's more in the details. So one great example we've talked about in this past year was crowds. When you talk about crowds on a visual effects project, you're often talking about invading armies or swarms of zombies or whatever. They tend to be used more in action sequences or in big stadiums, things like that, big shots. Whereas on an animated film, because the entire thing is synthetic, the entire thing is manufactured, a lot of times the crowds are everyone for whom the performance is secondary. So we've been calling them often extras. The extras in an animated project, which would probably just be real people on a live action set, are run by the crowds team using the same tools, and so there's a difference in the details of what their needs are. And so a lot of what we've been doing is making sure that our VFX leadership and our animation leadership on the artistic side are communicating, that they're talking about the things they're needing, the things that are challenges for them, and when possible, finding a common solution. When it isn't possible because their needs are distinct, then at least they've adopted kind of a you go, then I go kind of mentality to how they're making use of shared resources to solve the problems.
Right. Yeah, no, fascinating. I mean, lots of my friends are visual effects artists and have clearly been working from home in the pandemic. I was curious, coming back to you, McKilly, there's sort of not just the hardware technology, internet pipeline stuff. There's also how to continue acting as a visual effects and animation company with working from home. What do you feel like are the things that Cinesite has done in that regard, just to help it along?
Yeah, I mean, beyond the practicalities of, beyond the basic technologies of just remote workstation and all of that, we've been, following a few different approaches, and every studio has customized and adapted in slightly different ways depending on the style and the specific needs for the location. But there's all sorts of from activities, group activities that we try to encourage, to try and keep communication going for anything which is not outside of the usual dailies, meetings, and so on. It's really important to establish connections and making sure that the team get to know each other. So there's a variety of events that go from yoga sessions, Zoom-based yoga sessions, to very recently some very interesting chat rooms that I've been following with people sharing artwork that they have all been creating during the course of a month, and it's always incredible to see as if it's easy sometimes to forget, in the pressure of the work and delivering shots, sometimes people forget just the raw talent that we have in the building. And sometimes just looking at these sketches that people are doing on the side, you get to appreciate what an amazing, talented team we have across all of our studios. So again, it's really a variety of ways to try and bond and connect, particularly for new joiners. That people who have joined the team during a pandemic, they never had a chance to meet anyone else in person, or let's say we're starting to meet now, which is always interesting when you have to recalibrate people you imagine to be really tall may not be as tall as you imagine, and vice versa. It's always interesting when you see the people you've met in a Zoom meeting for so many months, and all of a sudden you see them in person. But again, it's a huge variety of ways. There's still a few from a more practical and technical perspective. There's still a few processes that are not quite as smooth or as efficient as we would like them to be. Review and daily session at a high quality are always something relatively challenging, where there are always some compromises that you're going to have to get one way or another. But again, things are getting better without a doubt. I have gone leaps and bounds compared to how things were when we started. So yeah, it's all moving forward without a doubt.
Yeah, because Holger, I was going to say, visual effects and animation studios just had to do this. It was just, and companies around the world had to do it. But I wonder, there's probably been some people who love it, as in artists working from home, and there's probably some people that struggle with it a bit. My guess is that there's going to be a hybrid solution, a hybrid future for this. Maybe it's almost too early to say what will happen. But do you have any thoughts on the future of working from home? Whether or not Cinesite has decided those sorts of things doesn't matter. I was just thinking, what's your thoughts on this? Because about 2 years ago, no one ever thought VFX and animation artists could work from home, could they?
I mean, I must say, I actually supervised 3 shows in the time we were at home. I think it went pretty smooth. Artists were very committed. I think moving forward, it will always be part of the business. I think the only limiting factor could be the clients saying we don't want that anymore. But I think the availability of artists and where you can pull from, increased massively, and especially senior talent that might not want to live in the big cities anymore, or have moved somewhere, or have a nice chalet or something, are extremely excited about this situation. What I see a little bit concerning in this environment is, just speaking from my history, when I was a junior or mid, I always tend to look at the monitors of my colleagues and turn around, ask questions. I'm quite proud how our juniors manage at the moment, because I wouldn't know how to. It's probably more tutorials online, probably chat, but it doesn't feel like as easy, because they need to commit to ask somebody officially, essentially. So I think that's somewhere where we can definitely improve. How do we onboard these people? Documentation in general needs to become more extensive, I think, with the fact that we're working from home, because you can't ask the buddy next to you as easily. So I think these are the challenges, but I do believe it will always be part of the VFX future.
Yeah, I think adding to that, without a doubt, this is something we are already planning quite extensively in the different location, and without a doubt, some form of hybrid work is going to be part of the future for Cinesite. Exactly the details of how it will be implemented is a matter of a few days a week, and how exactly is it regulated and so on is still being finalized, if you wish. But without a doubt, it's going to be part of Cinesite moving forward.
I would add that one way that it's been an absolute positive has been in our push towards being a more global studio. The notion, it is so easy to fall into the trap when you're having a meeting about any given topic and you pull 15 people together and 10 of them are in one location and 5 are in another. It's so easy for that to become a primary conversation and then a secondary location that's listening in, instead of more egalitarian. And so as one of our big pushes over the last year especially has been, how do we engage all the studios equally and get everybody in the conversation about how do we want to evolve as a studio? How do we, Cinesite, want to move forward? Having communication where you have 15 video windows up in a virtual room talking without any regard to what location any of those 15 people might be in has actually been really nice, because it opens it up to everyone being equal in the conversation without having to think about it, without having to put effort towards that equality. Everybody, by the mechanisms of the mechanics of how we're talking, everybody is equal. And so in that perspective, at least, it's fostering this global communication, which is what was important for us to evolve anyway. I think it would have been harder if we'd been in the various studios.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wanted to pivot now to some of the big tech topics away from work from home. And I mean, we can't ignore the fact that virtual production and real-time technology is just something that seems to be mentioned every day. And part of that is the huge push by Unreal and Unity to adapt their game engines into visual effects. Kelly, what are some of the conversations that have been happening at Cinesite in relation to virtual production and real time?
Without a doubt, as you say, these are topics that come up almost on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And it is something that we have been looking at and exploring for a few years. Our exposure, without a doubt, we see the use of real-time in general, and more specifically today, Unreal Engine as a great opportunity for us to streamline our processes in many different areas. We have been, our approach has always been fairly cautious, and we look at the specific upcoming projects and identify opportunities to explore these technologies in line with the projects that are lining up for us. So our first real experiments, we actually, our first time we looked at real-time and game engines was, I can't remember, 5 or so years ago. We did a little virtual camera prototype system running Unity, and there was a specific tablet from Google called Google Tango, which had a built-in scanner and some specific hardware to facilitate camera tracking. So we built a prototype there for our feature animation team to assist them with creating more realistic camera moves. So that was our very first experiment with game engines in general. Then we moved on, I think it's 3 years ago, we started working on we had an opportunity to work on a big location entertainment, so a theme park ride project, which is something we don't generally do, but we thought it would be a fantastic opportunity for us to explore again the territory of Unreal in that particular case. So we delivered this project, which was for Orlando Universal Studios, a show called Born Tentacular, which is where our content is projected on a huge LED. Is presented on a huge LED screen, and that was the first time we delivered rendered elements in Unreal at a massive scale, and it was a very interesting learning experience for us. And from there, we decided to focus on animation and explore what Unreal could do for us in animation. So about a year ago, we started a little project to develop a little short. It's something we kept internal because it's attached to a future project, but we developed a little short, 2.5 minutes of a little scene in one of the upcoming projects developed entirely in Unreal. And it's still, something which is very much work in progress. It's not something that is a fully flashed production pipeline, but clearly something that we are monitoring very closely. The opportunities are for sure very exciting for us, and something we are developing. It's not necessarily something that is using a huge amount of our team yet. Most of our production is still on more traditional approach, but we have pockets of artists and developers looking at ways to bring that all into our workflow.
Right. Because, Holger, I was going to ask you, I mean, one of the interesting things about real-time and virtual production, I think, is that it's useful when it's useful. I mean, I'm enamored by it, but sometimes just going out and shooting a normal plates for a visual effects film, virtual production, LED walls, they're not necessarily the best thing to do. They are incredible, and there's amazing things done with shows like The Mandalorian and whatnot. but I kind of feel like it just depends on the project, right? Is that sort of your view and how virtual production can be used in visual effects?
Yeah, I'm definitely also in two minds, like seeing like how late decisions are made, how late we're deciding on what does the environment look like. Sometimes we are remodeling an environment 2 weeks before the delivery. That this decision is now actually happening in pre-production is probably something good for the producers because it becomes very predictable. But I think it would also have a trend, where you have an environment, you shoot it, and then you redo it anyway at the end, potentially on certain sequences at least. I think the biggest benefit I see from any kind of volume shoot is proper lighting. Like when you do sort of your driving comms, your window comms, the lighting is kind of most of the time wrong or needs adjusting or tweaking. It's a lot of effort to achieve a simple look, which shouldn't look like a cheap rear projection. So I think for that, it's actually good, especially driving comms with interactive light, getting anything coming from behind the camera that's animated in terms of light source is definitely a plus. And then I think the other big thing is really sort of virtual scouting, giving essentially the filmmakers the opportunity to do layouts, finding locations, we've done a couple biopics, and when they were shot with not the real stadium, it's like you put the real stadium in and it's always something is wrong at the edge of the frame. Had you seen this before, the camera would have never been placed that way. So then the massaging happens, a lot of fudging. So all of this could be prevented, I think, if you knew what you see beforehand. Of course, this could be solved with some more geeky tech whiz, but I think, giving like simple tools or even like a tablet or phone for somebody to explore these locations could be hugely beneficial, I think.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And Hank, what about maybe leaning towards feature animation? Where do you see real-time and virtual production methods coming in more for Cinesite projects?
Yeah, I mean, I've always seen it as kind of three distinct categories where they fit in nicely. One aligns with what Holger was just talking about, which is in the early stages of an animated project when the director and the designer and the art director and all that are still kind of figuring out the world that it's going to take place in, because it's entirely manufactured. Anything that can help them get to those answers quicker is a win. And so having real-time tools at their disposal to slap together an environment, get cameras in there, talk about that environment without a lot of expenditure of artist time is a big win. Anything that can give us answers early, anything that can help inform the story team of where cameras might be so that the storyboards are better informed, things like that are all big wins on the early stages. Then there's the asset and shot production process itself, where there's a lot of opportunities in there where real-time can help a lot with diagnostic purposes. There's things where right now, layout artists, the animator, the character people, the character effects team, all that, if they have better understanding of the context for the choices they're making, for the lighting situation, light over darks and dark over lights, all these kinds of artistic decisions that are happening, the closer to a final frame you can get them without hampering their ability to work in real time as it is a win. So that those kind of categories where you can use it to supplement their workflows while they're doing the work. And then for certain classes of projects, for certain kinds of looks, there's the possibility of using real-time technology to create the final imagery. That would be for particular looks of particular projects. There's always going to be projects that stress and strain the imagery we're creating in ways, even with a render that runs for 2 days, it's a challenge. But for certain kinds of projects, real-time, even all the way to the final frame, could be a win.
Brilliant. In the same way that I wondered about how Cinesite has adopted virtual production and any real-time tech, I wonder if the studio has been looking into any machine learning or AI approaches. Does anyone want to jump in with any thoughts on that and any examples of where Cinesite might have adopted such things?
I can start with a couple of comments. So we started with a few obvious low-hanging fruits, if you wish, things like super resolution to test, increasing resolution, and then maybe Hank will talk a bit more about Image denoising, that's something we've been exploring particularly in the last year, and it has been a great success. Another area that we are exploring at our Trickster studio very actively at the moment is deep fakes for face replacement in case of stunt action. So that's something that is very, very active, and the results we have seen so far are extremely encouraging, and looks like it's going to be a fantastic solution for the work that we're doing there. These are some of the key areas that have been actually deployed. And then on top of that, there's a lot of other conversations that, or little exploration that we've been doing from style transfer and things like that. But Hank, maybe there's something you could add to the.
Yeah, we partnered up with Intel and their open source denoiser to get that into our workflow and get that Adam's Family 2 was first project to use it, but moving forward, we're using it on all our projects. And it was a great win. We're in the process of, for that initial push, it was primarily using the learning data they had already done in the process of releasing the product. We didn't have a lot of time to train it up on the specifics of our imagery, but moving forward, that's what we're working towards is it'll, especially on an animated project, because you're generating so much content, getting the denoiser to actually learn the type of material you're creating will be a big win. So yeah, we'll be using it on all of our future films. There's all kinds of fun areas. It's certainly a topic I'm very excited by. Anytime you're generating a large amount of data in any given category, so there's things like, one of the areas I've been super excited by that I'd love for us to play with at some point in the future is machine learned based in-betweening. As animators are setting their golden poses, they start out with the broad golden poses on an animated project, and they're always very pushed and exaggerated. And then they go in and they start in-betweening. They start creating those keys to get the shapes of the motions, the shapes of the silhouettes down to the particular style of that character. But over the entirety of a film, you're producing hundreds and hundreds of shots of that character. And the idea that you could make the animators more efficient because that's the least fun part of their job, is placing those in-betweens for between 3 frames where it isn't quite giving them the curve they want. But if you can build a better in-betweener that learns from the choices they've been making, that's a big win. There's so many areas like that where just the vast amount of data we create opens itself to machine learning possibilities.
Yeah, totally agree. Holger, have you got any thoughts on machine learning and AI specifically in relation to visual effects?
Well, there's one of the really obvious ones, which is rotoscoping, or potentially marker removal or prep work in general. We've done a little bit of exploration, mainly for post-viz, not for production quality, but it's very encouraging. Also, AI-generated depth maps potentially could be something, so to improve our compositing workflow. I think the other very obvious one is actually related to a lot of these sort of superhero movies, a lot of late costume changes or costume augmentations, where any kind of potentially just image-based motion capture, but also, like Michaela mentioned earlier, like actually deepfake face replacements on superheroes could be a way to go about. So you kind of motion capture the characters from the video actually, and then replace the faces. So I think there's a lot that could be done in that area too.
Yeah, absolutely. Another technology concept which initially doesn't feel like a tech thing to talk about, but I feel like it's part of that change in the visual effects and animation landscape is what you're delivering for. Michaela, you might have mentioned Cinesite really used to really concentrate on films. And of course, there's been some great TV work in the past as well. But now, it's films, animation, for streaming, for theme park experiences, things that are going to go direct to TV. I did wonder whether that changes the way Cinesite needs to think about deliveries and pipeline and technology at all, or does it all sort of it really now needs to be 4K, 8K, whatever it is that really what you're always aiming for?
It's an interesting question. In terms of the practical aspects of the deliveries, without a doubt, there's not a huge amount of difference between the delivering for streamers or high-end episodic TV or even high-budget feature films. The deliverables are always very similar. At this point in time, there's no significant difference. The production process and the challenges of managing these projects is quite different. From a pipeline perspective, we are, for the most part, keeping the same core foundations to support both visual effects, feature film, episodic TV, and animated feature and animated episodic. We are trying to put together a foundation that will support all of these processes, but for sure, there is room for optimizations to cater to specific need of each one of these different flavors. That's something that we are looking at. For instance, we were talking a moment ago about real time, and Hank hinted at there might be projects where real time could be used all the way to final deliveries. That might be for sure an example of an area where, depending on the specific target and the specific deliverables, a real-time solution could give us a huge opportunity to deliver final frames directly in engine. So yeah, we're always looking for ways to take this core foundation of a pipeline and then adjust it or customize it depending to the specific target that we're trying to hit. Right.
And Holger, do you have a view on that in terms of the different kind of deliverables you've had to deal with lately? Is it actually really kind of packaged up in very similar terms now?
It actually is. I feel like it's at the moment it's very limited still. It's like most of the time actually mono comms, single frames. I mean, a lot of movies get converted. There's definitely a trend where we prepare for stereo conversion, but most of our deliveries are really just mono, and that's at the moment what it is. What has happened is probably something that got introduced with Cats the first time, that we deliver multiple times for different releases in different countries. Not every country gets the same finessing level potentially on the first release. So yeah, incremental versions of the movies, I think, is something that is actually now, happening in some cases.
Hank, what have you noticed in that regard? Maybe also just in your background in feature animation as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it with the move from theatrical to streaming, there's a lot of different kinds of pressures based on where you're landing the project in terms of price point and schedule. And so from a technical perspective, a lot of our conversations are just about capturing efficiency gains everywhere we can. And because that's universal. If we become 50% more efficient in our ability to produce animated work, then we can capture that as savings on a project that is aiming for a particular very tight price point, but we can also turn that into more iterations and raising the bar on the art for a higher caliber project. And so, we're looking for every opportunity to make the Cinesite workflow, as we had talked about earlier, a global workflow, so we can leverage our workforce across the different studios and as efficient as possible working that way, so that we can capture that and deliver to a wide variety of price points. As far as content's concerned, it's one of the fun things of doing that, is if we can hit more aggressive price points and things like that, we don't necessarily have to make product that has billion-dollar global appeal. We can deliver something for a streaming platform that is more niche. And that's kind of exciting because it opens up the kind of artistic opportunities to create a wide variety of products. And so we're having a lot of fun with the projects we're working on right now, and we're really excited about what this is going to mean for us and what we'll be able to create with our art.
I wondered if there were any very specific technological things that we haven't talked about that you each feel are going to have a big impact in visual effects and animation, that you just wanted to mention, whether or not Cinesite has adopted them or is looking into them. Sorry to put you each on the spot, but maybe Holger, is there something that you think is out there that you do want to look into, or that you think is the future?
Well, I think there's definitely a bigger interest in the studios of sharing assets. I've seen many movies recently, like where the number of vendors actually increased, but then went down because the replication in asset cost just was too high for the studio. So, I mean, there were various attempts of unified file formats for different DCCs and different then adopted by different vendors. So I think with USD adoption, this hopefully is the solution to some of it at least. So I think that's also where our effort lies to make this a big part of our processes.
Coming back to you, Hank, do you see anything like that you'd want to pinpoint?
On the animation side, a lot of our discussions over the last year have been about the goal of animation is to create collaborative art, and you have a team of people that gather together to create that thing from the early germ of a story idea all the way out to the final frames. Finding new ways to collaborate, finding parallel workflows, things like that. The idea of collaboration groups so that assets and are crafted by teams of people across disciplines, and adopting new workflows there to enable us to raise the bar on the art we're creating within the time. There's always a box. There's always time pressures and schedule pressures and money pressures and whatever. But it's how much art can you cram in that box becomes the fun challenge. And so we keep having discussions about how can we find new ways of working that enable us to raise the bar on our art.
Absolutely. And Michaela, any technologies or outcomes or things you wanted to specify that you want to look at in terms of VFX and anim?
Something fairly generic that we are very keen on improving on is just automation in general. It's not necessarily a technology as such, but the general idea of automation and being able to really automate any of the steps that might be fast and relatively efficient today, but still take up time to our artists. Any time that is spent on non-creative steps gives us an opportunity to automate and skip that part of the process, at least from a user perspective. So that's, I think, is where a lot of the opportunities are for us beyond everything else we discussed in real time and machine learning, which are obviously have huge potential, needless to say, to disrupt in so many areas. I think the other one where really we can make a big difference is pipeline, particular pipeline automation, just to streamline the workflow and making sure that one user can control a lot more shots, can produce, propagate data as needed without anybody else having to spend time in this workflow. So this is the other element that comes to mind. But again, the other huge opportunity are the real time, or everything related to real time and how it could really transform how we work, whether it's going to be a game engine or another traditionally offline renderer, getting to the real time performance and coming from the other perspective. That could be another path, or it's something like Omniverse, or one of these multiple technologies could really, I think they're all converging into the same result, which is managing an incredible amount of complexity and dealing with every possible case and providing real time. Whichever is going to get there first, I think, is going to be the one that has the most disruption in the way we work.
Absolutely. Guys, this has been so great chatting about the state of play with technology at Cinesite. But maybe one thing I didn't really talk about right at the beginning is Cinesite's 30-year role in, setting some standards. I want to ask each of you, and you might just say no, whether any of you had a chance 25 years ago to sit on a Cineon box. Is that something that anyone actually had a chance to do more than 20 years ago? Holger, sorry.
No, I didn't get the opportunity.
What about you, Hank?
Yeah, I've been around Cineon boxes.
It's only because I never have and never really saw one in the wild that I was curious about it. What about you, Michaela?
I did actually. When I joined the company again, as I started at the beginning, 20 years ago, my first job was, that was the point in time when actually the London studio was transitioning from Cineon to Shake. So for the first few years, my job was really working on the Shake tool set, the Shake pipeline, and a lot of it was looking at tools we had in Cineon and finding a way to bring the same functionality to Shake. We also had a very active scanning and recording side of the business at that point in time with the Cineon scanner. And so I've been I came in at the very end, if you wish, just working on the transition to Shake at that point in time. But I definitely had a chance to spend time with those systems. And, in those days, the file format of choice was always Cineon files, Cineon frames being handed and moved around. So,
Well, in the old SGI RGB file format for years and years, the transition from SGI to Linux with the industry at large, there have been a number of big sea changes over the years.
And Ian, when talking about technology at Cinesite, I would also like to mention Gaffer. Gaffer is a free and open source node-based application for look dev, lighting, and pipeline automation. Gaffer was initially developed by John Haddon, who is still Gaffer lead software architect. It has been adopted by Image Engine initially and has now been at the center of Cinesite's look dev and lighting workflow for both visual effects and animation for a few years. Gaffer is extremely mature as a product, and it has been supporting at this point probably hundreds of visual effects shows and a few fully animated feature films. It is render agnostic, and although Arnold is the main renderer we use at Cinesite and the one that is most battle tested, it supports 3D Light, Appleseed, and some amazing members of the Gaffer community has been developing support and integration for Cycles renderer, and also we have a V-Ray integration now getting into beta. And although not quite production ready, we have a prototype of a RenderMan integration. And since we adopted Gaffer a few years ago, the focus has been on enabling a multi-shot lighting workflow so that, again, one artist can manage multiple shots at the same time. And this has been a major driver for our efficiency gain recently. Now we're shifting our focus towards using Gaffer to encode and automate bigger parts of our production workflow. We continue to invest heavily in Gaffer, and we always encourage everyone in the broader VFX animation community to check it out and see if it may fit into your workflow. Again, it's completely free and open source. And if you are interested in learning more, you can do so at gafferhq.org.
Yes, and I love thinking about the way Cinesite has adapted to change, scanning and recording, Cineon miniatures. I remember Cinesite launching into 3D conversion, stereo conversion for a time when that was a big thing. Listen, let's wrap it up there, but it's been really fun chatting to you about the state of play. Thank you, Michele, Holger, and Hank. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been great.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. See you later.